Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Loft in Battleground Games and Hobbies, Abington, Massachusetts. I'm Andrew, and I am going to be painting a little bit more with the Star Wars Legion starter box, which I have been working on for a few weeks now, off and on, very small spurts here and there between shifts and such. If you were watching yesterday, you will have seen that I got a little bit of work done on some of the Rebel troopers, but not a lot. I worked on faces yesterday. So we got the two Duros warriors done. As I said when I was doing it yesterday, I did them very, very bright blue and red. When I put a wash on them, it's obviously going to look a lot less glaring. And then we worked on face tone for a bunch of the Rebel troopers. My goal today, during today's stream, is to work on faces a little bit more. I'm going to do some facial hair, because a lot of them have beards and mustaches and such. And then I'm going to start working on their cute little Rebel hats. So I'm just sort of working my way down. So I'll start with their hats, and then we'll work on like their vests and their trousers, and then we'll work on, the other like clothes, belts, belt pouches, stuff like that, backpacks, and eventually we'll get to boots and gloves, and they'll start to look a little bit less like little plastic army men and a little bit more like Rebel troopers. For reference, I'm using the color scheme for the Rebel troopers from Star Wars: The Return of the Jedi. And where's my reference picture? This is what I'd like them to end up looking like. Oh, come on. There we go. So that's my ultimate goal, is to get them looking somewhat like this here, where got the sort of brownish bits as well as a lot of sort of camo color. I have never done camo painting, so that's actually going to be a lot of fun when we get to that stage. I'm guessing that it's going to be do a base coat and then just sort of some dry brushing to add different camo colors in. So we'll work on that when we get to it. Today, it's faces and hats. And caffeine, because, oh man, it's not early, but I just, I need caffeine to start my day. If you were watching the other day when I was working on these fellows, you will have noticed that a couple of them, the coloring didn't really stick on the face. It didn't adhere very well, or the paint was too watery. And the result was some of them are still kind of green-faced underneath the flesh tone that I put on them. So I have to find the ones that are the most egregious examples of that and take off my glasses so I can actually see. That one's not bad. When I put a flesh wash on it, it'll look better. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. If you were watching, I was sort of mixing paint as I went. So some of them have darker skin tones than others. That looks really good. I like that guy's face sculpt. He's got very prominent cheekbones. Looks very cool. That could use another coat, I think. That could use another coat. That's not bad. Pretty good. That's pretty good. So these three are the ones I need to address their facial color for. I'm using Army Paint Tanned Flesh. I bought, when I started teaching myself to paint, a starter set, and it came with a variety of Army paints, and they have been exceptionally useful. And then of course I've expanded my collection as I've gone, which is what you do whenever you're painting something new. You're buying new stuff. So let's see if this stuff is gonna come out any better mixed than it was yesterday. That's better. Yeah. So I'm just gonna add another layer to these fellows whose faces need. You can see I just barely tip the brush in paint. Yeah. Try and get this fellow's nose where it's all green because the paint didn't go on. Some of this, I am going to do a flesh-colored wash to all of their faces at some point, and that will definitely, it'll bring out some of the detail on the faces, but it'll also help with any of these areas that have less coverage, I think. As I was saying, the last time I played with these guys, or the last time I painted these guys, this particular sculpt with the rifle right up against his cheek, in his collar here, either he has like a severe double chin or he's wearing something under his shirt, and I went with the severe double chin. I just, it's too late to go back now. But I painted that. He's got a very prominent Adam's apple, I guess. Try some, get some paint in the line of his neck here. Eventually I'm going to do a wash over a lot of other stuff here, and that will fill in the cracks like the back of his neck and stuff here. So I don't need to get a lot of flesh colored paint in there, but just a hint. I should turn on chat and see if anybody's watching, because I have no idea. Not right now. Feel free to join me if you want to converse. The side of his face over here, it's obscured by his gun. I'm less concerned with because it's obscured by the gun, but I'd like to get some paint in there. That'll do. Okay. Let him dry a little bit. I don't know if you guys can see what I'm seeing here, but just the green of the primer coat is totally coming through. That's why I have to do this second layer here. Probably hadn't shaken the paints adequately when I was painting it yesterday, or day before yesterday, the last time I was streaming. and that's why it came out all watery. Oh man, I'm globbing it on. Look how much paint I got on my brush that time. I think that is the most important thing I've picked up as I've learned to paint, is getting the right amount of paint on the brush for what you're painting. Because if you have too much paint on the brush, you lack precision, and it's going to fill in detail on the face, or whatever sculpture you're working with. This guy's gonna need a third coat. This stuff really went on light the first time, which is fine. Trying to get the bridge of his nose. It's kind of in shadow there, but not super happy with it. Look at his lips. I'm going to obviously go over some of that when I get to his beard. Okay, one more guy to touch up, and then we'll start working on facial hair. This is the same sculpt as that other fellow. He did touch-ups. Yeah, see, that's too much. You don't need a lot of paint. So in the Star Wars Legion box, the starter set, excuse me, muted to myself because I thought I was going to sneeze, and then there was no sneeze. But yeah, in the Star Wars Legion box, there's 2 of each sculpt, except for the hero sculpts. The heroes, which are the AT-RT rider, the 2 speeder bike riders, and Luke and Vader. So you'll see 2 of each of these folks as I'm painting. I mentioned last time that half of painting is finding the right angle to get your brush with the paint to where you want it to go. Especially on these miniatures. I said last time, if I had it to do again, I would probably paint the pieces before assembling the figures. For just this reason, that getting into these areas is tricky. And I have said before that a lot of the time, these are not going to be competition models. This is the store demo copy of Star Wars Legion for the Abington location of Battleground. So these folks are going to be used for learn-to-play games and that sort of thing. They don't have to be perfect. And I tend to get hung up on getting things like the side of his face that's obscured by the gun here. And you don't really need to. Nobody's going to see that. For one thing, when it's on the table and you're playing with it, you're not going to see his face at all. But for another, nobody's going to be looking at him in that kind of close-up detail. Anyways, I would know. And I want everybody to look as good as I can get them to look. All right, now for the fun part. This is going to be cool. Last time, I said, you'll recall, I am doing a variety of flesh tones because it is my strong feeling that the Rebel Alliance would be a varied group because the whole point of the Empire versus the Rebellion is that the Empire is monolithic and oppressive, and the Rebellion is, more all-encompassing. So I did a variety of different flesh tones, which was fun, and I was sort of mixing flesh tones as I went because I knew I wanted each person to have a little bit of individual personality, from the very, very pale to the very dark-skinned, and of course the blue. But I also want to do a variety of different facial hair colors. So let's find everybody who has facial hair. He's got a beard. He's got a mustache. He's got a mustache. And we're just going to give everybody, there's some of them who don't have facial hair. There's a couple of them that are clearly ladies and have not chosen to have facial hair. This is LeVar Burton. Check it out. That's totally LeVar Burton. I love it. But yeah, many of them do have beards, goatees, mustaches, all that sort of stuff. So we're going to go through them each, and we're going to give each of these folks a unique facial hair. All right? So let's start with, I'll just start at one end and go down the line. So this fellow here has very sharp cheekbones, has a full beard. You can see I sort of painted over it there, but that's why you do the flesh tone first and then do the beard second, so that you can do the beard over it. I feel like he's a very grizzled sort of fellow, so he should have a grayish, whitish beard. I'm going to do his beard in Castle Gray. Gracious, I'm shaking the entire table as I'm shaking up my paint. So, that's not even shaken up yet. I don't need a lot because I'm not going to do a lot of them in this color. Alright, now I believe I can just use my standard brush. What I'm using is a small layer brush. It's just the easiest thing for me. It's my sort of utility brush that I use for almost everything. So let's get a little gray. And we'll start over on this edge here and work over towards the other edge. Yeah. It's got sort of a Jim Henson beard going on here. I just get a Jim Henson vibe from the sharp cheekbones and the full beard. Jim Henson did have a Kermit the Froggy sort of voice, but he also had some Epic, epic beard. This is where I'm trying to be a little bit more delicate and not go over the bits that I painted the other day. A little bit more precision than when I was painting the flesh tones, because this is the next layer up. This is always sort of a relaxing thing to do. You know what it probably is? Why I find painting so zen and relaxing? Is that your breathing when you're painting is like meditation. Because you take a breath while you're wetting your brush, and then you hold it while you're applying the paint. Hold and exhale. So the breathing is like meditation, which definitely helps to relax a person. Alright, I need this paint to go on a little bit thicker here. He's got a very flesh-colored beard here because I went ham when I was doing this. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. This up a little bit, just on this side of his beard. Because the flesh tone is showing through the beard pretty strongly. So nice. So there he is. Very grizzled trooper. Hi-ho! Okay. Next. Next we got a heavy gunner. He's got a little goatee. What do you think, chat? I feel like I should maybe go darker with this. I'm gonna do a dark gray for this fellow. It's almost a black. He's a little younger, or more young. He's got a little boop there, a little soul patch. Oh no. I booped too much. I wonder if that's wet enough that I can get it off from quick. Yep. Well, I blepped a little bit there. It's alright, I'll hit it with some flesh to undo it at some point. Let's get his mustache now. Mustache goes down his cheeks. It's a big, impressive mustache. Like that. There we go. Pretty good. Got a little blep there. I'll come back at that. Actually, I can probably do it right now. This is a different shade. I don't want to do that. This flesh shade is more zoop, 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 zoop. More rose brown, I think. Okay, he's done. Who's next? This is one of the rebel leaders, obviously in a position of power. They give him very white beard, because you don't get to be a leader of troops. It's a fresh-faced boyo. And I think it'll contrast nicely. Trying not to get paint on my fingers, because obviously that's less than ideal. There we go. These guys have fun hats. They're going to be interesting to do when I get to them. Sort of going with the grain of the beard here. Try and highlight it without going too much. It's not a huge beard. It's not all over the place. Very good. Let's do the mustache. Probably hit the beard and mustache with a darker wash, and it'll give him a sort of salt and pepper look. I think that might be too much paint on the brush. Ooh. Careful. That came out pretty well. Not perfectly symmetrical, but then beards don't tend to be. It needs to go a little higher on his right, my left. Well, that'll do. Looks pretty good. And yes, I got paint on my knuckle. I got my hand right into my palette. Next up, so this is the same sculpt as, no, I just did one of these where it has the full beard. Here we are. So this is the one I just did, the Jim Henson with the gray beard. So here's the same sculpt. I've given it darker skin tone. I'm gonna do the castle, or not the castle gray, the dark gray tone, the almost black for this one's beard. I do love making coloring decisions in my painting. I know some people slavishly, or they look at color guides, or they try to get things to look just exactly like the box or something like that. And I have a lot of respect for that, because that takes a lot of work. But part of what I enjoy about painting is these color decisions and the creativity involved. I guess what I'm saying is, I have never in my life been one to follow the crowd. And in my painting, that's just an extension of who I am. I enjoy going my own way. Time for the mustache. I wonder if I should go all Admiral Holdo on one of these guys and just give them bright purple hair. pretty good. Yeah, that'll do. I'm having some fun doing some painting. Alright, I already did the other guy who's this sculpt, the heavy gunner. He has the black beard. This guy I did in a much darker skin tone. Let's do the Castle Gray for his. Start with the mustache. Very good. Need a little bit for his soul patch. Looks pretty good. You can see there's some pocking in here. That's because the primer I used didn't go on super evenly. Not happy about that. But can't do much about it. Alright, here's my other rebel leader. Gonna do something different. He's very pale looking. And give him a bright, bright yellow beard. And then I'll do a wash over it later to make it less bright yellow. Now my wife will tell you she hates painting in yellow because it never gives you the coverage that you want. I don't know, there's something about the formulation of yellow paints. They're just too watery. You can see on the brush there how it's not. It's just a watery paint. So I'll have to do a couple coats. But again, I'm doing yellow for the highlights, and then when I hit it with a darker wash, that'll go down into the lowlights and it'll look really nice. Watery paint. Looks okay. It is a very bright yellow. This guy just has a mustache. And again, very prominent cheekbones. I like those. You know what I don't have yet? I don't have anybody who's got a reddish facial hair. I'm gonna try and, this might not work. I'm gonna try and mix some orange with the yellow. Try and blend something up. That's very orange. Let's grab a little black. Mix that in there. Nope, now it's just gray with an orange tint. Well, I don't know. It's sort of muddy. Guess I'll just go gray on this fellow. Oh man, look how much paint I just got on that brush. The paint does thicken over time. And you don't need that. Yeah, this is going to be tricky. Again, nobody's going to see it but me. But I want to get the other side of his mustache. Part of the problem is that it's in shadow. Part of the problem is that it's obscured by the gun he's holding. That's not bad. You know who that is? That's J. Jonah Jameson. Get me pictures of Spider-Man! He's done. This is the same sculpt. The guy who fell off his base. Give him a white mustache. Still haven't gone back and pinned him. Oh my goodness. Oh, that went everywhere. Help. I'm just getting my brush wet to try and get that off of there. If I'm fast enough, I should be able to wick it away. And there we go. Yeah, we're okay. We're okay. Now let's try and get less paint on the brush. Try again. Much better. Most of these rebel troopers have seen too many winters. My grandfather used to rock a mustache very much like this. darker white mustache. Then he decided to go clean shaven, which cut like 10 years off of his look. There we go. Pretty good. Just a nudge more on the left there. There. Pretty happy with that. Getting close. I'm already done with him. Already done with him. Already done with him. I think that's everybody's facial hair. Awesome. That was fun. Okay, hat time. All right, so if we look at my reference image here. So what do we see in the hat? It's got a light brown brim and earmuffs, and the top is sort of a light brown. And then there's this gray-green metal bit here. And then I think darker brown chin strap and also on the ears. You can see the chin strap there. It's a darker brown. So, yeah, that's my plan. I'm going to start with fur brown, which is a light brown. I'm going to get myself a fresh palette. And we're going to start with fur brown, and we're just going to do the top of their heads and the edges of their ear flaps in that fur brown and up along the bottom side and the brim. So, do I have a better light brown than that? I think that's probably the best brown. This will be good. I hope. About 11:30 now. I have no particular rush today, but I do need to start shipping stuff at some point. We bought a whole bunch of new Magic cards in the last couple of days, and I need to sort and file those. Alright, so these guys don't have hats, so I'm not going to worry about them today. They're just going back in the box. Which leaves me with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 hats to work on today. Probably take another hour or so. Get as much as I can done on these hats. So I'm doing the brim here. My chat has stopped working. To get in under brim along here. And then we're going to do the outline of his ear flaps. Let's see how in the sculpt there's two bits to the ear flaps. There's this bit here. Oh, I got it on his face. It's okay, that's what washes are for. Anytime you color outside the lines, it's going to be obscured when you do the wash, because the wash is going to go into there and fix that. Although that's pretty egregious. That was pretty awful. Let me try to undo that while it's still wet. Some of this away from his cheek here. That's a little better. Too much paint. There we go. Isn't this relaxing though? Nice. This edge without doing what I did on the other side, which was get a huge blep of paint on the brush and it went all over his face. Well, not all over, but you saw it. It wasn't good. It wasn't pretty. There we go. Now let's get the top of his hat. I feel like this should be paler. is a good brown, but I feel it should be almost a tan. What did I use when I was doing Luke's robes? I used a skeleton bone for that, didn't I? That might be too pale. I'm probably going to end up doing his shirt in that. So, just keep going. These hats as seen in the scene with Leia and Wicket. It's a hat. It's not going to hurt you. Always a delicate balance, getting enough paint on the brush to get paint on the model, but not so much paint on the brush that it goes everywhere. In a lot of these areas, if some green shows through, that's okay. Oh my goodness, did you see that blep? Because ultimately these guys are supposed to be wearing camouflage, so maybe some green is going to show through. That's one. Only 12 more to go. Wonder if this will get faster as I get used to it. I don't want to go too fast because when I go fast I make mistakes and I get sloppy. I don't want these guys to look sloppy. I mean, they don't have to look perfect because they're just the demos, but they should at least look decent. They should at least look like somebody put some effort into them. I fear I may have chosen, when I was doing the beard on these guys, to use that paint that has a gloss finish to it, which I am constantly... I've done it several times now, where it looks like just a nice black, but then it always looks shiny. It was good for Vader's eyes when I was doing Vader, but less good for a beard. It's alright, I can go over it with a black primer. I have some black primer in the other room. This is weird, this paint is going on a lot more watery now. Usually it's the other way around. Paint starts out watery, and as you go, gets thicker as it dries out on the palette. But this stuff, less so. I probably just hit a watery pocket there. It probably wasn't shaken up enough. This backpack is going to be fun when I get to that. I wonder what color choices I'll make then. It's too much paint. I am glad I finally did get a chance to play the Learn to Play game with these guys. Because it is actually a really entertaining game to play. And it's got some fun flavor to it with the speeder bikes speeding all around the place, and Vader and Luke cutting things up with their lightsabers. The store doesn't even open for 15 more minutes. I don't know why you're calling. Okay, that's that one done. There we go. Maybe just a little thicker on the side here. Lovely. Next one. This is where it gets a little bit repetitive. Ooh. Ooh. Oh, look at that. This fellow's got his goggles. It's going to be fun. Have to make some choices when we get to those goggles. This is what I'm talking about with things only I will ever see. I don't think anybody who ever plays with this demo set is going to pick this guy up and look underneath the brim of his hat. It's just not going to happen. But I have to know it's done right. When I start rushing, getting way too much paint on the brush here. had intended to get here much earlier to work on this today, but it was just very difficult to leave home this morning. My shift in the store on Wednesday afternoons, I run the online distribution portion, so I have to mail magic cards starting at about between noon and 1. So I didn't have to be here super early, but I did want to work on these models. But I had a cat. Guys, I had a cat and she was purring, and it's so hard to leave when you have a cat who's purring. I think everybody who has purring cats knows. So I had hoped to get a lot more done before noon today. It's fine. Everything's fine. I'm just going to keep going until I'm done with these hats. Or at least a first coat on these hats. And then I'm going to take a break to go downstairs and do some shipping. And tomorrow, hopefully I'll be here a little earlier. Come in like 10 o'clock Eastern. And I'll do some more painting then. I'll be done with their hats. We'll start working on shirts and trousers tomorrow. If you ever have trouble motivating yourself, and this applies to everything, not just to painting, don't stress over the larger task. Just pick something and get started on it, and if you're like me, you'll keep going until you're done with that one thing. So today I said I'm going to do facial hair and hats. And even though I didn't get here as early as I would have liked, I'm going to get these hats done today. I may end up doing some of it off stream, and I hope you folks will forgive me for that. I do work a little bit faster when I'm not talking to the chat as I go. Not a whole lot faster, but maybe a little bit faster. I still have to do my drill and pin project with this fellow to get him stuck back to his base, because my troops keep popping off their bases, which was an issue when I was assembling everybody, and has continued to be an issue. So I need to find a more permanent solution, and my more permanent solution is I just have to bite the bullet and pin them to their bases. Ooh, that was a lot of paint. Oh, I got some paint on the gun. It's okay, because I haven't painted the gun yet. So, who cares if I get paint on the gun? I'm going to paint over that. As long as it doesn't fill in any detail. So yeah, the two lessons that I have learned as a result of this project, painting the store demo copies of Star Wars Legion, are there are several figures that would be easier to do if you painted them before assembling them, and this is something my brother Jam pointed out when he was working on his in the Saga store, is it feels like Fantasy Flight sculpted the pieces in such a way that it's almost as if they assembled bits of them but left unassembled the bits that you would want to paint before putting things together. So, for example, the snow speeder, or air speeder as it is, because it's not specifically for speeding only over snow. It works in any terrain. But the speeder has sort of flaps on the side, and you could paint under those flaps before you assemble it, and it's a lot easier than painting under the flaps after building it, because you can't reach under the flaps after building it. So that's lesson number 1. These figures definitely would be easier to paint if you painted them prior to building. Lesson number 2 is that the bases, I don't know why I had so much trouble gluing guys to bases, but I really did. If you watched the assembly videos, you saw that they were constantly popping off their bases as I was gluing them down. In some cases it's because they're in dramatic poses like this, where you can see one foot is on the ball of the foot, so there's less contact with the base. But I also think it's an issue with the plastic that the troops are made of, and the plastic that the bases are made of are different. The bases are resin, and these guys are sort of PVC, they're plastic. And the result, I feel, is that it's harder to get a bond between the two of them. So it may take an awful lot more time, but I think it's worthwhile to actually drill and pin individually as you go. It's going to take more time to put each person on the base if you're doing it that way, but I feel like it saves time because you're not constantly having to re-glue folks to their bases. Just once they're there, they're there. Oh, hey, Thunder Speaks, how you doing? No, the box comes with resin bases. So this is, I don't know if you can hear, it's a different plastic than the plastic that they're manufactured from. And it's my theory that that's why the seal wasn't good when I was gluing them down. It could also be a matter of I was just being impatient as I was gluing them, because I had so many fellows to stick to their bases. It could be that I was just impatient, and as a result, they didn't stick well. Getting a lot of paint all over the place here. I feel like the bases are definitely a different material. They are definitely not the same plastic as the figures. Thunderspeak says that they're not resin, that they're plastic. And I could be mistaken in my belief. Oh, that's an excellent point, Thunderspeaks. Thunderspeak says that resin often has a releasing agent that is applied to the mold so that it will come out of the mold more easily when it's being manufactured. And if they are not properly cleaned, that releasing agent is still on them. And that could very well be an issue if you're using resin. I know that the same is often the case for pewter. I've always been told when assembling pewter pieces or painting pewter pieces, be sure to wash them with soap and water and a toothbrush before you paint or assemble because of that releasing agent. So that's an excellent point. I did not, because, and I mean, if you were watching when I was doing this on stream, I just went for it. I just started building stuff. I did not do any prep, so I didn't trim mold lines. You can see there's mold lines still on these guys. I didn't, and I mean the mold lines aren't bad, but they're definitely there. And I didn't clean any of the pieces before gluing them to each other. So that could be a lesson too. If you're building your Star Wars Legion figures, perhaps clean the bases before trying to stick things to them. Yes, that's what I was saying, Thunderspeaks, is that I may, if I had it to do again, I would probably drill and pin everybody. It would be more time consuming, but I wouldn't have situations like this where this guy just popped off his base. I could be reasonably confident that once folks were glued down, they would remain where I glued them. The other warning that I would have for people who are assembling their Star Wars Legion things, and it's probably far, far too late, because I think a lot of the people who are going to play Star Wars Legion have already built their things at this stage. But the other warning I would have is if you're intending to, as I did, apply texture to the bases on the AT-RT that comes in the box, and anything with a larger base, they have molded in a little line there. You can just barely see right there the notch where that mold line is. That is part of the range finding for the set, and I just glued the texture right over it. It's completely gone. So I'm going to have to, at some stage, actually paint in that range finding line. I should have been more careful and glued around it instead of covering it right up. So, lessons learned. You know, you do some stuff, and sometimes you make mistakes. Is this? Nope, that's flesh. That's not what I want at all. I could give them flesh-colored hats. but that's not my objective. So I've done 5 brims and earmuffs. Making progress. And I believe the store is open now. So, if you were waiting until Battleground Games in Abington was open, come on in. We're open now. Not sure. Oh, okay. So, Thunder Speaks asks, where's the water in that paint? And I've talked about this before. Folks who do professional miniature painting will often do a watered down coat prior to just sort of a base coat. And perhaps that is the best way to do things. I have never done it that way. And I always just apply the paint unwatered directly to the primed model. Yeah, exactly. I don't thin my paints. Maybe it's because I'm lazy. Maybe it's because I've never seen any advantage to doing so. Just adds more time to the painting process because you're going to have to do additional layers. The downside, of course, is with some paints that are thicker, you're going to lose detail in the model. So, yeah, I saved some time, but maybe I'm losing some detail in the model because I'm using paints that are not thinned in any way. I have said before on these streams, I am not a professional level or award-winning painter. I am strictly an amateur painter. I do it for fun, and in the case of these particular figures, these are the store demo, and they don't necessarily have to be competition quality, which is good because I probably couldn't do that even if I did take the time to water my, or thin my paints. But yeah, I skipped that bit. I know that it is something people do, and I've never chosen to do it, and I don't feel it has very negatively impacted the quality of my figures. In fact, I prefer paint that adheres better to the model. When it's thinned, I always feel like I'm not actually accomplishing anything. I go through the motions of painting, and there's no paint on my model. So I'm actually curious, Thunder Speaks, how, in what way does it not add time to the painting process? Because I feel like I'm getting away with a single coat on a lot of the stuff that I'm doing here. I had to, if you were watching at the start of this stream, I had to touch up a few of the models because the flesh tone was too thin and the primer was showing through and they looked very sickly and green. But if I had to do that for everything, that would take a significant chunk of time. I'd have to paint everything, multiple layers. I mean, I'm probably committing some horrible cardinal sin. I will say, if I painted more consistently with the Games Workshop paints, I probably would want to thin some of those down, because some of those are thick. Some of those are really heavy paints. Now that makes sense that it would become habit, and it's probably a good habit to form. Do like he says. Don't do like I do, guys. I've never said this was an educational stream. This is a hanging out while you watch somebody learning to paint stream. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, obviously I'm an amateur and very slow in my painting anyhow, so it makes sense that you could get more nuance from doing multiple layers, and if you have a lot of practice, you probably do get those layers on faster than somebody like myself who, you can see, it's taking me quite a long time just to get the bits on that I'm doing. And I think muscle memory is definitely a thing. You pick up techniques and you learn to get the right amount of paint on the brush, and you learn to apply the strokes properly. That's something that I've really enjoyed about learning to paint, is you think, before you do any painting, that it's just going to be put paint on brush, push brush against model, boom, paint happens. But there's a physicality to the paint that you really appreciate, especially at this scale. I've talked a lot about how getting the right amount of paint on the brush is something that it took me a while to figure out. Because if you just mash your brush into the paint, you're going to have a ton of paint on there, and it's really hard to apply it without it going everywhere. Thunder Speaks, are you doing the airbrush seminar in Saugus? Because I saw they were doing a Learn to Airbrush seminar that's going on at the Saugus store. I do not own airbrush. It is definitely a down the line thing. Helps that I've primarily been doing D&D minis and other such small scale things. I feel like if I was going to be doing tanks or anything larger scale, I would want to have some airbrush ability to get those larger surfaces, because it would just be terribly time consuming or annoying to get areas that are not. Here's an example. I was talking about how the aerosol primer went on awfully. Maybe you guys can see it on stream, but look at the edge of this guy's hat. You can see there's a sort of pocking there where the aerosol went on with air pockets. It's sort of uneven. Not super happy with this aerosol that I used. As I've said before, everything I've painted in the past, I've primed with the Chaos Black spray primer. And for these, I used some army paint aerosols. And I had one utter disaster where it went on far too thick and removed all the detail from several of the Imperial troopers. And some of these rebels, you can see that sort of pocking in the aerosol. It's disappointing. Okay. Handy tips and tricks from the chat. Thunder Speaks says, warm the aerosol can in hot tap water, in a bowl of hot tap water for 5 to 10 minutes before using it. I've seen folks before talk about how using aerosol when it is cold, and if you're doing it outside with a rattle can often cause issues. Battleground in Abington has a back hall that is indoors, which is where any of us who paint in the Abington location do their priming. So I don't have that excuse. But perhaps I should have warmed the cans. That makes sense. Excellent tip. I will have to try that next time I am priming an army. Brush is beginning to wear. I tip the brush as I'm drying it, so it remains fairly good, but I can tell that the bristles are beginning to spread a little bit. I never did this guy's mustache. Or did I do this guy's mustache in gray? It still looks kind of green. I grab some gray paint and do another coat on his mustache. Yeah, like I said, using a rattle can outdoors can cause major issues. I am aware of that. Whoop. I've left some paint on his shoulder there. That's fine. So Thunder Speaks, how long have you been painting? I believe you've said in chat before that you are competition level, that you enter competitions and you, of course, take commissions, right? How long have you been... Oh, gracious, look how much paint I got there. How long have you been doing this? Processing. So you've been painting, technically been painting since the 80s. Okay. The first figures that I started painting were the Rune Wars miniatures that came out about 2 years ago. So I've only been painting for about 1.5 years. Which is why I don't think it would be even appropriate for me to claim that this is an educational stream. This is just a fun opportunity to hang out and watch somebody paint. You've seen my wife painting on stream, and she's much more accomplished than I am. She's been painting for probably 4 or 5 years now, but definitely not since the 80s. Around 23 years. Well, I would hope that in that time you would pick up some good tricks and such. I can hear Chase and Steven downstairs, which I think means there's going to be a Charterstone game going on in the Abington location soon. They still haven't finished the full season of Charterstone yet. Alright. 5 more hat brims and earmuffs to go, and then we'll get the dark brown, do the other bits of the earmuffs. Nobody of these guys seems to have a chin strap as seen in the reference image that I showed earlier. So I don't have to worry about chin straps. I'm just going to do these sort of things on the sides, and then I'm going to do the sort of, I don't know what you want to call it, the metal or plastic bit that goes around their helmet. I would love to see a work in progress. If you want to post a link in chat. I believe I have links in chat turned on. There we go. Oh, yeah. So much fun detail to work on there. I love that. That looks spectacular. I don't know if you've been watching Amanda as she works on the trucks from the Wasteland Express Delivery Service board game. But she's getting good at getting those finer details in there. Well, I hope your class goes well. I'm certain folks will pick up some handy tricks from you. That's something that I've really, really liked about the painting community in general, is that everybody is so willing to help everybody else with advice and tips, and I don't feel like there's anybody who masters some technique and doesn't want to immediately turn around and pass it on to other folks. It's a very giving community, and I appreciate that. So yeah, in that example image there, I, with my untrained eye, spot several cool techniques. Because you've got a lot of interesting layers of detail going on in that sort of banner. Looks like it's got obviously some washes to get into the bits around the stitching. You've got some sort of free-handed artwork on the banner. Like you said, a lot of layering to give it some heft. No washes, really. I'm impressed. It's all just layering to get all of that detail into it around the stitches and stuff. Just with gradients. Very cool. Yeah, Amanda is getting good with doing gradients when she's painting, as you saw when she was working on the Dark Crystal figures. I am not anywhere near that level yet. I tend to do a much more fast and dirty approach. As you can see, get one base coat on and then rely on the wash to pull out all the detail in the model. This would be why you're the professional, and I'm the guy with one person watching them on stream. Okay. Making progress. I mean, obviously I enjoy learning new techniques. Um, I would love to learn how to do layering and such, gradients. Right now I'm pretty dedicated just to getting these paint on the figures. So this sculpt I find kind of interesting. It almost looks like this eye is bandaged. This is not just the ear flap. It actually comes down over the eye to a degree. I may go back over that with a different color to make it clear that it's not just part of the ear flap. Thunder Speaks, when you say these minis are basic, do you mean the ones that you're using as examples for your class, or the ones that I'm painting? Definitely, I agree that the Star Wars Legion figures are fairly basic, and I think that is intentional on the part of Fantasy Flight. Yeah. It is intended as a game for people who have not played miniature war games or done miniature war game painting. In our Norton location, which is the one that has the most active Legion community, there are a number of people who have never played a miniature war game. They've only played X-Wing minis, which tactically Legion borrows a lot from X-Wing minis in terms of gameplay. So it's a reasonably easy step for them to make. But these are people who have never painted a mini. Basically like me a year and a half ago when I started with the Rune Wars minis, which is the same sort of deal. And definitely Star Wars, they want it to be an accessible place to start. The Games Workshop game that I most want to try out, in terms of actually building and painting the minis, is similar in its level of detail, because again it uses the basic plastic, not resin, and has very easy to build pieces, and that's Shadespire, or Underworld Shadespire, whatever. I have been very tempted by the Shadespire Dwarf Army. It's, again, about the same level of detail as these Star Wars Legion minis. And in terms of assembly, most of the figures only have 2 or 3 pieces. I feel like that would be a good entry point to Games Workshop, would be Shadespire. I've only got 3 more to go here. And then the dark brown on the ear flaps should be pretty quick because it's just sort of a boop boop on each side of the head. And then we'll do the main portion of the hat, which is just a big flat surface, so it should be very easy. I feel like I'm starting on these hats with the hardest part, which is the ear flaps that go down and around the back of the head and right up against the cheeks. So there's a little bit more precision involved in painting those. But things should accelerate a bit when I get to the sides. My paint is beginning to get a little thicker than I like at this stage. So whereas I don't thin my paint at all, if you've been painting from the same blob on your palette for almost an hour, it does tend to get thicker. I've only got 3 more to go. Thank you, Thunder Speaks. Who points out quite correctly that if I had thinned my paints, they wouldn't get so thick so fast. So I estimated when I was working on my Rune Wars mini Wykar Undead Army that it was taking me about 8 hours per figure to get them done. And I feel like maybe I was being conservative there. I feel like it might have been taking me longer than 8 hours per figure. These guys probably a little less than that, averaged out. But since I'm painting an entire squad in basically 2-hour shifts, because I do a little painting before going to work, like a couple days a week, it's going to take me a while to get all of these guys done. The Imperials I can cheat on. I just have to, get the areas that should be black, like in their crotches and the backs of their legs, and then make sure everything else is white because, again, the primer didn't go on terribly well. And then I can just smack them with a wash and call it a day. I'll probably do a little bit more detail on the bases. Since I went through the bother of texturing all the bases, I feel like I should do some work on the bases as well. just in terms of painting and doing a wash on them, maybe put some grass on or use some tufts. Tufts are such a cheat. I love them. Definitely, the paint is getting thicker and I'm getting sloppier. This is the disadvantage to having so many figures to do, and I do really have to go to work at some point. So, but I want to finish. I don't want to go down there until I've actually got these hats done. Tell you what, Thunder Speaks. Next army I do, or next painting project, I will take your advice and I will water down my paints for better control. I actually have a plan for my next painting project. Alright, take care. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. Amanda will probably be finishing up her trucks this weekend and would certainly appreciate some company. I don't know if she's doing that on Friday or Saturday, though. See you later. Sounds like Steven is teaching Chase downstairs to play Raiders of the North Sea, which was so much fun when we played that on stream, which was just a couple weeks ago, if anybody was watching on our regular Friday night board game stream. Played Raiders of the North Sea, and it was awesome. I definitely want to try out some of the other variants. This again is that one with the eye patch. Flavorful, I guess, because it looks like this is a flamethrower. I'm not 100%. Since I've only played the Learn to Play game, I don't know what the heavy weapon troops do. And this is one of the two heavies that is not in the Learn to Play game, but can be used if you build a full Rebel squadron. But it looks like that's a flamethrower that this trooper is carrying. It's entirely possible that their face is burnt, and that's why they have an eye patch. That's what I'm going to choose to believe anyhow. That's the lore that I'm going to give to this character. That as they trained with this flamethrower, they got scorched in the face, and that's obviously an occupational hazard. Oof, that was a lot of paint on the brush just then. It's okay. It's okay. Man, Steve is making me want to play Raiders of the North Sea again. This is another one where the aerosol came out all bubbly. It's the second to last one for this. There we go. Last one. I may just call this stream to a halt. Oh my goodness. Look at this stream. Look at how awful this is. Look at the way that the aerosol went in. It looks terrible. Oh well. I think when I am done with this figure, with just this portion of this figure, I'm going to call this stream to a close. Not going to finish these hats today. I'll finish them tomorrow morning. So I will be back tomorrow morning, probably around 9:30ish. Under the hat, the brim here. Sorry, I'm very quiet. I'm listening to Steve downstairs, and I don't know if you in chat can hear Steve through my microphone. So I've been very quiet while working on these last couple of figures, just because I'm listening to Steve explaining the rules downstairs. He's getting the rules right because he's Steve, but I feel like he's missing out on a lot of the flavor of the game, which is what I enjoyed so much of Raiders of the North Sea, where you can turn cows into provisions. He goes over that. You can turn cows into provisions by going to the longhouse. But the flavor, obviously, is that you're slaughtering your cows and generating provisions. And he just sort of glossed over that. Steve's more interested in the rules of the game, I think, than in why the rules make sense. There's different kinds of gamers. Alright. Once I'm done with the top of this trooper's head, I'm going to call this stream to a close. Tomorrow morning, around 9:30 Eastern, giving me a few hours to work on stuff, but around 9:30 Eastern tomorrow morning, I will be back to finish the hats, which is, like I said, the dark brown on the ear flaps and the around the outside of the hats there. I'm trying to decide whether I'm going to mix a paint for that or just use one of the paints that I have. They should be sort of a greenish gray. I have a variety of greens. I have a couple of different grays, but I might just go with a blue gray, which I already have. Or I could investigate what paints we have downstairs and purchase a greenish gray. We'll find out tomorrow. Okay. So, made some progress today. Finished up some faces, got some facial hair done, and started work on a bunch of hats. Tomorrow, we'll finish those hats and I think start on their clothes. So, thank you so much for joining me, folks. And thank you, Thunder Speaks, for all of your interesting ideas in the chat. I had a lot of fun today, but now I do have to go get some work done. So I will see you guys later. Thanks for joining me.